lecture series. They have all given funds for us to be able to do this, as well as Buff Allies funding. I would also like to thank the members of my Buff Allies committee, because without them, we can't make these things happen, and I certainly can't do this alone. I also want to thank the members of the Distinguished Lecture Series Committee and West Texas A&M University at large for recognizing that a variety of voices makes us stronger in this community and as a university, and allowing us to bring the speakers that we feel are important for our community. I want to thank the members of Buff Allies for being there for our students, faculty, and staff. What you do on this campus is important, and what you do in this community, and so I want to do some public thank you for that. And then I want to thank a lot of people who help make these events happen. The Office of the Fine Arts and Humanities, Dean's Office, they do an amazing job in helping us get this together. The JBK Center staff, who really helped us last minute change this venue to this great venue, and Information Technology, who's making sure we can live stream this event for those who couldn't be here tonight. So now it's my great honor to introduce tonight's speaker. Blake M. Dremann is an active duty Navy Lieutenant Commander who hails from St. Louis, Missouri. He graduated from Ozark Christian College in 2003 with a Bachelor of Biblical Literature. He commissioned through Officer Candidate School in Pensacola, Florida in March 2006. He completed Joint Professional Military Education Phase 1 through the Air Command and Staff College in December 2016, and started his Master's of Business Administration at Norwich University this past June. He was doing homework in the hotel, so yay, Blake. He is currently assigned as a Supply Chain Management Coordinator for the Navy Nuclear Enterprise in Virginia. Dremann has served in a variety of sea and shore duty assignments, completing 11 deployments. His initial sea tour was aboard USS Denver, assigned to the Supply Department as the Sales and Dispersing Officer, completing 5 forward deployed patrols in the Pacific. He served as Supply Officer aboard USS Maine, completing 5 strategic deterrent patrols and ranked #1 of 14 supply officers on the waterfront. Ashore, he was assigned to the Naval Support Facility Diego Garcia as the Sales, Food Service and Billeting Officer. During Operation Enduring Freedom, he was the Assistant Commander's Emergency Response Program Coordinator at Combined Joint Task Force in Afghanistan, supporting approvals for short and long-term infrastructure improvement projects throughout Regional Command East. Most recently, he served as a Joint Logistics Intern on the Joint Staff at the Pentagon. His awards include the Defense Meritorious Service Medal, Navy and Marine Corps Commendation Medal, Joint Service Achievement Medal, and Navy and Marine Corps Achievement Medal, and various other decorations. He is qualified as a Submarine Supply Corps Officer and a Surface Warfare Supply Corps Officer. Lieutenant Commander Dremann is a 2015 recipient of the Navy League's Vice Admiral Robert F. Batchelder Award, the Navy's highest logistics award for contributing to the operational readiness of the fleet. He is also President of Servicemembers, Partners, and Allies for Respect and Tolerance for All, known as SPARTA, a national LGBT advocacy organization that is focused on transgender military service. This is the leading organization that helped change the policy in the Department of Defense that barred open transgender service members. He resides in Alexandria, Virginia with, he claims, the cutest Chewini around, Lucas. If you have a Chewini, you can take that up with him later. Please give a warm welcome to Lieutenant Commander Blake Dremann.
Thanks. Good evening. Before I get started, we have a couple of admin notes that I have to take care of, and one is that I speak for myself only, and my experiences. I do not speak on behalf of the Department of Defense or the Navy. SPARTA is one of many organizations that helped change the ban on open transgender service, and my title for my speech this evening was given weeks ago before the NFL situation and is not meant to speak against or in retaliation to their particular, the message that they are trying to convey. So now that we got that out of the way, so as stated, my name is Blake Dremann. I've done 11 patrols. I've served 11 years as a Navy Supply Corps officer. And I've done USS Denver, which is this marine mover out in Japan. I did the USS Maine, SSBN 741, doing strategic deterrent patrols on the ballistic missile submarine. Last 2 years, I was on the joint staff doing logistics, and in my spare time, helping try and shape the policy that did a lot of the changes for the transgender policy. I was able to meet with some of our senior leaders to show them that deployability is not an issue. I did just start my master's degree. I've gotten through one class. I'm halfway through a finance class, which is probably going to kick my butt. If you noticed what my degree's in, it's a biblical literature degree. I didn't do any math. And now I'm in finance and having to try and figure out, how to do math again after not touching it for the last close to 20 years now. So, and I do have this 12-pound Chweenie, who is the cutest thing that you'll ever see. And he knows it, and he lets you know it. But I just happen to be transgender and lead a large military advocacy organization that's organized mostly online through Facebook, and we use that platform to get stories out, to tell the stories of our service members, to make sure that we change public opinion regarding what's going on with service members. And here I am sitting in a chair, getting ready to talk to you about I Will Stand. So what does it mean to say I will stand? If I were to stand right now, is there something more implied by that? If I say I will stand, and what? What happens? Am I just standing to shout? If you talk about it, you're going, I will stand by you. I will stand for human rights. I will stand against injustice. I will stand for the First Amendment. If I stand up, am I really doing anything other than standing? I don't know. Am I? So I grew up in Missouri, and I grew up in church, and I was the school Jesus freak. I never missed to see you at the poll. I went to church twice on Sundays, once on Wednesdays. I had all the t-shirts that said Lord's Gym on the front of it and walked around school like that. And every year we would go to a conference called Christ in Youth Conference. And my freshman year of high school, anybody go to those things, Christ in Youth Conference? They still put them on. Or Choir of the Fire, I guess that's similar. Every year it was the highlight of our summer, right? And we would go, and this particular summer the theme was Stand. And the worship leader was Jeff Moody. And worship and youth groups would rebel against all things when it came to making sure they got to go to the CIY conference that was led by Jeff Moody. They needed to have him lead the worship. And this year, he actually wrote the theme song for that year, and it was called Stand, obviously, with the theme of Stand. I think the song would be called that. So it goes a little something like this. It says, I will give my life for you. I pledge my heart to be true. O Lord, I want to stand for you. With every step I take and every choice I make, O Lord, help me stand for you. Notice that taking a stand means something more than standing and shouting from the rooftop. It means that I'm going to stand and take some kind of action along with that. If I simply stand and do nothing, I'm waiting to be pushed back into my chair. So when I claim I will stand, there has to be some action implied by that. And now that I'm standing, what do I do? So here's what we're going to talk about a couple of things that we do when we stand. And the first thing is I'm going to stand and step forward. And by that I mean volunteering. We must step forward in life. To sit is to be defeated, and to remain silent to remain still is to be stagnant. So someone must start. We must step forward and volunteer. The biggest influence that anyone has is in their very own communities, by themselves. So, and that's not limited to family. That is our communities, that's our friends, that's the people that we interact with. And standing and volunteering doesn't mean that I need to stand and step forward into some big organization. It simply means standing and stepping forward into the very life that I live so that I can change hearts and minds. Do we have any Navy veterans in here? Yep. So does anybody know what Navy stands for? Navy stands for Never Again Volunteer Yourself. And there's a reason for that, because that usually leads to all kinds of hurt involved with whatever you volunteered for, because what is supposed to be a volunteer opportunity definitely becomes your primary duty until said event is done. Guess who is very horrible at taking said advice? This person right here. When I joined the Navy, I volunteered to go to the most remote island and duty station in the Navy. That's called Diego Garcia. Does anybody know where Diego Garcia is? Do you know where the tip of India is? It's about 1,000 miles straight south, 7 degrees south of the equator. It is literally 5,000 miles in any direction from anything. And it's 10 square miles with a big hole in the middle. So the actual island is not 10 square miles. It's just like this strip that goes along in a big circle. I volunteered to go there. Then I volunteered to go to Japan, and then I volunteered to go to Afghanistan. All because if I didn't volunteer, who else is going to go? Or they're just going to make me go anyway, so I might as well volunteer. And then I volunteered for something that was going to change both my life and history. A little bit, at least. I volunteered to go onto a submarine as a female when we integrated women into submarines in 2011. I was one of the first people to stand up and say, "Here am I, send me." So to go integrate a 100-year-old tradition of an all-male space. About the same time that I volunteered was when I was discovering my identity as a trans person. So here I was going to go volunteer to be a female on a submarine, to get famous, and do all these great things, go down in history as a female submariner while I was transitioning to male. So that definitely made for some interesting conversations. So what the story goes, we were in Newport going through some training, and we had all just met. They picked 8 supply officers to go do this, and we went out to dinner, and we're getting to know each other, and we decided to go down to the waterfront to watch the fireworks, which I don't know why we did this. I hate fireworks, but we went to go down to the waterfront and watch fireworks. And there's 4 of us sitting on the bench getting ready to go through this training pipeline. And as we're watching the fireworks, there was a moment of silence. And each of us, it turns out, was thinking about, the ramifications of what was happening. Me with gender identity. You had other people that were thinking about, I'm not smart enough to do this, or my father was a career submariner, and now I'm going to go do this thing, and all the pressure that goes along with it. And all of a sudden, we all looked at each other, and we're like, what in the world did we get ourselves into? Because that's a lot of pressure. But volunteering is what needed to be done at that time. The point of the story is not that we did something tough, or that we did something that we thought we would do to do something great. The point was that we stepped forward, and we volunteered. And stepping forward doesn't mean putting yourself in the limelight necessarily. It means doing the things that need to be done. So if that means that I need to go volunteer at a homeless LGBT youth center, then that's what needs to be done. If that means that I need to set aside an hour a month to go volunteer at a soup kitchen, then that's what needs to be done. And that's what we need to do as advocates, as people who want to be allies, is find what you're passionate about and go step forward and do those things. Because organizations are not necessarily hurting for funding. They're hurting for people. They're hurting for people to step forward into those positions to provide the services that people need. And it takes up a lot of time. It takes up free time. It takes up your weekends. It takes up your evenings. And if, like I said, if it takes a few hours a month where you volunteer for the suicide hotlines, or taking 1 week in a month to go do whatever, volunteering at a veterans home and go talk to those veterans. There are veterans homes all over the United States, and these people are most likely without any family, and they are desperate for people to just come talk to residents. Stepping forward isn't just about the trans movement or open transgender service. It's about it's about finding that need and filling it. So stand up, raise your hand, and step forward, because the world needs people that cares about things that are bigger than themselves. Now, the second thing that we do is, when I say I will stand, is I will stand and step in. And by that I mean I will defend the rights of others. So when I say I will stand between those who will do harm and those to whom harm will come, that's what I mean by step in. Step in between. I'm president of a nonprofit called Sparta, and most of the things that I do involves making calls and emails with regards to service members who aren't, the process isn't working the way that it's supposed to. That calls for me, taking the time out of my day to do that. Is I make phone calls to people who can possibly look into situations that might be untoward towards the service member as they work their way through the transition process. And that's how I spend most of my time. I don't go barging in looking for a fight. I don't go, my lack of swinging fists does not make my defense any less viable. And believe me, we still need those people. You need both ways. So different people step in different ways. Some are louder than others, but both ways are needed. The key is to step in general, is to take that time to step in. So I get questioned sometimes as to why people might listen to me versus someone else. And one of the reasons is experience, right? I've got a lot of experience in what I do, not necessarily with the trans movement, but with military operations and things like that. Just like you would listen to a doctor over a med student, or you're going to listen to a lawyer over a law school student. When it comes to military things, I have a lot of operational experience, so people tend to listen to me. I graduated from this tiny little Bible college in Joplin, and we had several things that were different. It's definitely different than coming to a big school, right? There were definitely things that we could and couldn't do. A lot of things that I do now that I would never be able to do at Bible college. But one of the things that we couldn't do that's very different from today is we couldn't have TVs, right? Couldn't have TVs in the rooms. We had 2 TVs in every dorm, and one was in the main lobby and one was in the lower lobby. And then you could only, so in order to watch a movie, you had to sign up for a time and reserve the room to watch your movie. Then the movie could only be rated G or PG. Now, if it was rated PG, there might be some PG-13 movies that you could watch, and those had to fall onto a certain Christian list that said it was not a horrible movie, right? So one of the movies that came out my freshman year of college, many of you may have not have been born then, was the movie called Ever After, starring Drew Barrymore. And kind of that Cinderella telling of the story. And in the movie, there's a scene where the spoiled prince is like pacing back and forth with his mother in the room, and he's going off and on about how he doesn't want that responsibility, he doesn't want to be king, he wants to go live his life, he wants to take off and run away. And his mother says something very poignant at that time. And she says, with great privilege comes great responsibility. And let's see where I'm at. So with that, people ask me all the time if being trans in the military is hard. And for many of our service members, it's a nightmare because people don't understand, or they don't want to understand. I have to be honest, I have never experienced any kind of overt discrimination. And why do we think that is? There are a couple of reasons that go into that. First, what do we think? I'm white. White as a sheet, right? This does not tan. Not at all. It goes from white to red and then back to white. So that's one of the reasons I'm white. Two, I'm male, right? Big thing, white male. Three, I have passing privilege. When I walk into a room, no one is going to question whether or not I am a man. I definitely have a deep voice, and having been a smoker for the last 10 years, my testosterone only helped that voice drop even more. So that is the third reason. And the fourth reason is that I'm an officer. I'm an officer in the military. So combined with that, that gives me a lot of privilege points. And I'm perfectly willing to acknowledge that. But that's part of the reason why I don't experience a lot of the discrimination that other service members have experienced. Their experiences are very much valid experiences, and mine is, that's why I can go walk into a room. I can actually walk into a room and no one's going to question what I have to say when it comes to transgender service. For those very four reasons, right? Because they think, because of the image that presents itself. We were actually on a submarine once when I was still supposed to be female, and sitting with a contractor, and I've got my counterpart who's a female and my two senior enlisted chiefs, and he looks at him and he's like, hey, I thought this was an integrated boat. Where's the other female supply officer? While I'm sitting at the table. And the chiefs both look at him and they're like, that's the supply officer right there. That's that female supply officer. And he just was dumbfounded. And that leads to, I've never had that issue where I don't pass. Even when I'm trying to pass as a female, it did not work. What you see is what you get. The only difference between me and 15 years ago is that I had more hair. So, but that rank too, that rank as an officer carries so much weight. I'm not exactly a junior officer, so I've got some experience behind me, but I'm not exactly too senior. But it still carries that much weight. And not only that, but military profession has been seen as one of the most respectable professions in the country over the last several years through several recent surveys. So with that great privilege comes great responsibility. When I was checking out of my last command, my 3-star admiral at the time looked at me and he said, so at some point you're going to need to choose on whether or not you're going to be a transgender officer, and if that's the way you want to go, or if you're going to want to be a supply officer. And I really had to think about it. I wish it was that easy of a choice to make. Because there are many times when the weight of that responsibility feels like it's too much. And I'd rather sit down and let others take it and carry on with my career as a supply officer, because I really do like it. But again, with great privilege comes great responsibility. And if it takes someone in a position of power to stand up for those that are not in that position to do so, then that is my responsibility. And I can't shirk it. My job isn't necessarily to tell their story, because I can't do that. But it is absolutely my responsibility to speak long enough for them to be willing to listen so that others can step in front of me and tell their story, and I can step back. But until we get to that point, I still carry a lot of that responsibility, because people aren't ready to listen to those who are suffering. But they are ready to listen. It's called the Homogeneous unit principle, right? People are more willing to listen and learn against people who look and act and talk like them. It actually started out as an evangelical principle where we talk about how missionaries work. When you send people that look just like them and speak the language, that you're more effective. So it's the same way whether you're talking doing mission work or doing Christianity or doing ministry or doing LGBT movement and things like that, when you talk about people who are in many ways similar, you're more likely to have a chance to change their hearts and minds. And once you get to that point, then you can mold them to be able to be ready to listen to those who they really need to listen to, and not just you. But until then, so rather than standing and shouting about injustice, I step in to break down those walls of injustice. To do anything less makes me an accomplice to the very injustice I claim to be fighting. Or I might as well have stayed seated. I mean, honestly, if I'm not going to do what I have the power to do, then I might as well take a seat. The next thing that we're going to do is I'm going to stand firm. So, just like football player, I'm going to be ready. And part of that comes, I can't step forward and then step back the moment I'm challenged. I have to be ready to face the challenge that's going to come my way. I cannot defend someone to just back out because I don't have the intestinal fortitude to stand there and stand firm in what I know to be true. When I was in officer candidate school, we had Marine Corps drill instructors. You know, the type with the really big brim hat that you walk on the other side of the street to avoid because you're going to get yelled at. Yeah, those were our drill instructors. And everybody knows the Latin motto for Marine Corps, right? Semper Fi or Semper Fidelis, meaning always faithful. My Marine Corps drill instructor actually instilled in us a similar motto, and it was called Semper Fortis, which means always courageous. And it's kind of where we get that idea of intestinal fortitude, because the Latin meant that courage came from the gut. So intestinal fortitude means to do what is right no matter how I am challenged. So how do we stand firm? There are a couple ways to do that. When I was in Afghanistan, so deployments are a great place to learn about yourself, because you spend a lot of time by yourself in the dark trying to go to sleep and not able to do so. So it's a great place to kind of learn that you're probably going to battle your demons. And as I was coming into my identity in Afghanistan, there were not these hip websites that I keep hearing about, like YouTube or Reddit or Tumblr. I don't know how to use any of them. I can use YouTube if I need to find something, but don't ask me how to upload a video. I don't have a clue. I don't know how to get onto Reddit. I don't have an Instagram. But there were not any of these things in 2010 when I was dealing with this. So what did I have? I had Amazon. So my first thing that you need to know in order to stand firm is you need to read everything that you can. And I'm serious about that. Read it all. I ordered every book on Amazon about transgender, masculine experience, gender studies, all of that, because from about 7, so I worked from about 7 a.m. until 9 p.m., 9 p.m., and then I went back to my room until the following day. So my evenings were occupied with books. Some movies, but mostly books. And so I did. That's what I did. I read everything that I could, because I needed to know, plus my internet speed was like satellite internet that I paid $100 a month with that took 5 minutes to load up my Facebook page. So I wasn't going to be able to watch any videos anyways. So the point is to know the history, know what the facts are, read the RAND study. If we're going to talk about open trans service, read the RAND study, read the Palm Center study, read the Williams Institute study, read the stuff that we've got out, read the stories of people that are doing things, read as much as you can. Because as we know, facts don't change minds, right? We've learned that over the last few years, that I can present all the facts that I want and no one's going to change their mind because they think that facts are a liberal conspiracy. So facts and science don't change many minds, but if I tell my story without being able to back it up with facts, I'm telling a story with no teeth. And I won't change anything anyways. So there are two things that like I said, read everything you can. You can't do one without the other. There's another thing that you got to be able to do, and that's read everything that you cannot. And by that I mean you need to be able to read the things that authors that we know aren't supportive of transgender people are putting out there. I need to be able to know the attack before it's presented. Now, that's not for everybody, believe me. It must be done with many breaks, probably a glass of wine, and at least a half a pack of cigarettes, because that's about what it's going to take to get through some of these books. But it's imperative that we do so. Because if I don't know the attacks, I can't defend against them. And a calm sea does not a good sailor make. So if I can't withstand the storm that's going to come towards me as I stand in to defend, then I'm not doing my job. And when we stand firm and we build that foundation, we can change the world. Right? A successful man is builds the foundation on bricks that were thrown at him. So know what's coming for you, be able to grab those, put them in the ground, stand on them, and know that what you're saying is true. And I'm not talking about changing the big world. I'm talking about changing your world. We each live in our own worlds. The world is a big place, but we really only experience a portion of it. So that world is the one that's occupied by your fears, your joys, your family, your friends, your communities, your teachers. The great mathematician Archimedes said, "Give me a firm place to stand, and I will move the earth." We can absolutely change the world for the better. And we don't need to be given a platform in order to do it. We can make our own platform. And that is within our own worlds, within everything. And if you're doing it because you want the big national platform, I know your heart's not in it, and I'd rather you take a seat. Because I need people who are ready to stand firm, stand in, and step forward, who are willing to change the world. So I will stand up, and I will stand and step forward and volunteer. I will stand and step in to defend because I feel I have a lot of that responsibility in my position. And I know that my position is the right one. So I say all of that. So why does open transgender service matter so much? In 2013, when we were just starting out with this fight, we finally kind of got enough momentum to start moving forward into the Pentagon and start making meetings. There was an article published by a Seattle University professor by the name of Dean Spade. He did an interview with BuzzFeed regarding the pursuit of open transgender service. And he said, the campaign for military inclusion does nothing to support the grassroots work addressing urgent issues trans people face. It's actually likely to harm the work. The careful work of the trans movement has been to address myths and mythologies that will be lost in the certain sensationalism that will unfold around military service. And he called for an emphasis on imprisonment, poverty, police violence, and homelessness. And my friend Brent Tannehill, who's a RAND research analyst who does great work for them, came back with a different article to kind of refute a lot of that. And she said, he may do all of this, but all of that emphasis on homelessness and imprisonment and poverty and police violence does nothing to address the root cause. Those are only the symptoms of trans discrimination. Americans see trans people as disgusting and mentally ill, voyeurs, pedophiles, worthless and subhuman, and no matter how much money and time we put into social programs for transgender people, as long as we are perceived that way, we will continue to suffer. The ban on military service directly contributes to that destructive narrative, because people can come and say, as long as that remained in place, people can say, see, even the government does not value your ability to exist. These people are sick and the government knows it. When federal regs treated us as untouchable and we could not be seen as full citizens, why would the public think anything different? So I absolutely refuse to sit silently while people spread untruths. I refuse to sit silently when people disown their children. I refuse to sit silently while people suffer because others' religion believe that entitles them to be jerks, or advocate for our very destruction. The military is, of course, not for everyone. An open transgender service is really a stepping stone, a piece of the bigger pie. It's not about the right to serve, because there is no inherent right to serve. It is absolutely about our ability to do so. It's about the ability to serve. Every day we battle an ideology that trans people are obsessed with their identities, unfit to be a part of society. What greater stress defies that very logic than military service? It's not about getting free surgeries. The average transgender service member has 8 years and 2 deployments. They certainly did not join for free medical care. They joined for reasons like anyone else, whether that be free education, a chance to travel, a sense of patriotism, and a sense of being a part of something bigger than themselves. Most joined well before we were even close to getting this ban lifted. We joined the military because we stood to volunteer. We stood to step in and defend against injustice, and to stand firmly on knowing that we were capable of doing the job. And I will continue to stand until my oath is completed and I am no longer capable. So, thanks.
Thank you, Blake, very much for that message. We're now opening the floor for question and answer, and we have our WT ambassadors, which, by the way, thank you to our WT ambassadors as well, who were helping directing you into this space, and they'll be helping getting the microphones to you all.
Please, ask whatever question you think. I will choose whether or not I will answer it. So don't feel that you have a stupid question. So please, just ask your questions and I'll answer it.
Is the percentage of trans in the military greater than the percentage of trans in the non-military population?
So I'll answer that a little bit differently. So the percentage of people the statistic goes that trans people are twice as likely to have served in the military than the regular population. If you take the overall population of the United States, 10% of the people have served in the military. When you narrow that down to trans people, it jumps up to 20%. 20% of trans people have at one point or another served in the military. And that comes down to several different factors, but mostly the hypermasculinity of the military regarding either running from the need to express their femininity and running to things like infantry and submarines that are all male situations, or because masculinity is not looked down upon, so people like me can walk into the military and no one's going to look down upon me because I may be hypermasculine compared to the average cisgender female. So, does anybody else have any questions? Come on, I know you got questions.
Down with, we're going to get transgender out of the military. What do you think? Do you think that's really going to happen? What is your opinion of what he's trying to do now?
So we'll see where it goes. Right now we got the panel going on right now, and they're going to assess the evidence that we're capable of serving. The panel is going to be led by the Deputy Secretary of Defense and the Vice Chairman of the Joint Chiefs, General Selva. So we have some, that does play in our favor in the fact that the Vice Chairman was the one that was on the last panel when we changed the policy, as well as the Undersecretary of Defense for Personnel and Readiness was also on the panel when we originally changed the policy. So we have a lot of things going in our direction, and General Mattis, or Secretary Mattis, is someone that I respect a lot, and I know he's gonna weigh that evidence accordingly for what was already reached. We'll see where it goes. My personal opinion, I don't think that people like me are going anywhere, but I don't know what's going to happen. That is a possibility. I can't really speak to it. One, there's a lot of people watching, and two, I really can't. So I really don't know what's going to happen. I have great hopes in the fact that we'll be able to advocate for our position in a way that is supported by both facts and the positive stories that commanders are seeing on the ground as far as people transitioning.
I don't mean to sound facetious, but with everything else that's piling on the president's agenda, do you think it'll be done in a timely manner?
Well, so see, he's not in charge of it. The Secretary is, right? Secretary of Defense Mattis. And yes, there's a lot of things piling up on his agenda. And honestly, it would be nice if it would just go away and we move on from things, right? There are a lot of things piling up, and there are definitely things I'm sure he would rather be dealing with than dealing with a policy that we've already changed to determine on whether or not we need to go back. But at the same time, this seems to be on the top of several powerful organizations' priority lists when it comes to executing the Family Research Council's 5-point strategy for taking trans people out of the public eye. So.
In the 5 branches of the military, that is, we count the Coast Guard. Mm-hmm. Just kidding. But how many transgender people are in each branch of the service?
So I don't know how many are in each branch. There are an estimated anywhere between 6,000 and 15,000 across the services, active and reserve. So it is quite the population, and it's still a small population, but it would be a very big mission impact to suddenly remove 15,000 service members from being able to serve, and we have several conflicts on the horizon.
I have a question. Oh, right in front of you. So kind of tailing off, what branch would you say is the most compassionate or understanding towards the LGBT community?
The Navy, actually. They're the ones that have moved forward the fastest and the most efficiently, because they want people ready to go, right? What better way to get people ready to go than to get them healthy and ready and back out to sea? Because sailors aren't any good when they're on shore. That's what we do.
First of all, thanks for being here. Now, my question, when the status of the transgenders hit the newspapers and media in general recently, somebody began to talk about the price that it costs to go through that service, that transition, whatever. Frankly, I had never even thought about that. I'm very sympathetic to people who have these problems. I had a son who, at 32, died with AIDS, and I have worked with AIDS people and the gays and lesbians ever since. So I just automatically want to have the best for you. Now, could you give us any idea? I'll just ask you a very personal question. Did you get the operations at government cost? Can you tell us anything about that price? I'm just interested in the financial aspects of it.
So typically in a public forum, I would not not talk about my particular medical
Okay.
things.
Okay.
There are several estimates that are out there regarding the cost of transgender service transitions, anywhere between $2 million and $8 million per year for every single trans person in the military. Now, taken into context, when you talk about a military budget of $750 billion or a military medical budget of $6 billion, it's a very tiny percentage. The majority of transgender medical care is no more different than we do for non-transgender service members on a regular basis, whether you're talking hormones. So take hormones, for instance. We use hormones for guys with low T or for women who are going through premenopausal situations, right? We absolutely already prescribe hormones on a regular basis to non-transgender service members. We already do things like breast augmentations, hysterectomies, mastectomies, all of the things that the majority of things that we already do in the military. And most of those things are, hey, we have it, we're out for a couple of weeks, and then we come back and we go back to work doing the same job that we were doing beforehand. So the cost is really, it's a smokescreen, because when you have weapon systems that cost, $10 billion and we're still not up and running, to talk to me about $2 million, it's a rounding error on the greater military budget. So in all honesty, most of the stuff that that transgender people need, we're already doing. It's just expanding those services to get those people back to fighting strength, right? They're already out there doing great jobs before they transitioned, the majority of our service members, right? They're already succeeding and doing great things within the military. This simply takes care of the one thing that will make them that much better and give them one less piece of stress. So,
Thank you.
absolutely.
Hi. So what can a cisgender civilian do to support you in this cause?
So there are a couple things, and one is, if you've noticed in the news, we've got a couple of lawsuits going through both the ACLU, Outserve SLDN and Lambda Legal, and through National Center for Lesbian Rights. Each of those, if you have the ability to donate to any of those, that is one thing that you can do. The other thing to do is to learn what the fight is and to talk to your neighbors, right? If people start talking about it, bring up what you already know. Bring up the fact that you know people that are serving, that have transitioned, that are doing great things in the military, right? Because that's where we talk about making it personal, right? Because if we don't make it personal, it's this abstract thing that everybody still has this excuse to be afraid of, because they don't know anything. It's similar to how we deny other things are happening with discrimination. Because I'm not experiencing it, doesn't exist. Since I don't know any trans people, God forbid we go beyond my 8th grade education in biology, right? So that's part of what talking to people is to help them see beyond the information that they think they know and make it correct with experiences and the facts. Those are the two big things. One is donate to the organizations that are fighting it, and two, to talk to your friends and family and really just make them understand or help them understand, I should say, what the fight is all about, and correct them when they talk about there's no inherent right to serve. I agree, there is no inherent right to serve, but we've already proven that we have the ability to do so and deploy. So anybody tells you that the military needs to be 100% deployable 100% of the time has never served a day in their life. So, any other questions? Yep.
This is sort of like 2.5 questions.
Okay. But try not to fall off the stage.
Okay, so can you talk about to what degree maybe your experience studying biblical literature may have kind of prepared you to talk to people who might not be sympathetic to your perspective? Has that helped? Has it shaped your ability to communicate in certain ways?
Well, it has.
Okay, and so I would want to know in what ways, but also like, to what degree did that background kind of make your own kind of journey or discovery more difficult?
So it made my discovery a lot later in life. So I'm what you call a late bloomer. And I didn't even come out, I had to come out twice, obviously. I came out as gay when I was about 28, realizing that lesbian is a very bad word for me. It took me another couple of years, right? So realizing that didn't fit and trying to understand what the greater aspect of that was. And then there's a lot of family history that goes into that. So, and then I didn't start transitioning and socially transitioning until I was 30, 31, something like that. And a lot of that had to do with the fact that I grew up in the church and that I went to Bible college and that I was still very well involved in the church all the way up, still today in many ways. Now, granted, I'm in Virginia right now, so finding an open and affirming church where the population is more than 20 and not over 60 has been difficult. It's not a bad thing. It's just that at some point in time, I would like to have a dating life, and that hasn't happened for me. And church is usually a great place to start, but I'd like it to be more my age. So that hasn't really done anything. I'm probably more on the agnostic side these days as it is, but in all honesty, it helped me be able to build the foundation to where I know both sides of the argument. And then once I got out of kind of the insulation of the church, and I learned that there were other viewpoints that I had never known that existed, right? And learning to read those and talk about those and wrestle with them, like we talk about in Bible college, wrestling with the text, right? You still need to do that. There's still a lot of wrestling with the texts and stuff like that, and talking to people about how you wrestle with the texts, and that, truth and facts are not the same thing, and getting people to understand that their understanding of truth may be shaded with something that's not very well built into the foundation of what they should be. So that definitely prepared me in that. And it also prepared me to have a thick skin to be able to kind of handle having those conversations. I love comment sections on the internet because they give a great laugh. If you ever need a great laugh, just go to the comment section, especially if you can deal with it and not take it personally. So I don't feel the need to defend myself anymore these days. Anybody else?
I have one.
Where you at?
Right here.
Oh, okay.
So I don't want to dwell too much on the surgical part of it, but I understand that most transgender people don't have the surgery. Do you find this is the same case within the military branch, or do most of them go through the surgical
So it depends.
process?
It's definitely, it's a mixed bag just like it is with anything else. The military is kind of a cross-section of any population, and the numbers of who desires the various types of surgeries is very individualized, right? So each transition is determined by what they and their doctor have determined to be medically necessary for them to feel aligned and be ready to go back to work. And then the one thing that's difficult and different with the military is that those things kind of have to be scheduled along a timeline, right? Because we do have deployments and we do have operations, and while medically necessary, it's not medically expedient. So if I have a deployment coming up, now is not the time to say, I need to have this surgery right now, right before my deployment. No, that's not really the thing that we encourage service members to do. We encourage them to schedule their medical treatments like anything else, whether you're surgery for a shoulder surgery or a knee surgery or anything else that might be medically necessary but is not necessarily must happen right now in order for me to be deployable, then I need to deploy with my unit. That's really the really big thing. That can change just like it does with women who may have gotten accidentally pregnant before deployment, or someone who goes out skiing 6 weeks before deployment and tears their ACL and now they're non-deployable, right? It happens. Those type of things happen, but we try to minimize the impact to operations as much as possible.
Thank you for being here. What would you say the culture is within the VA system toward LGBTQ people, retired, disabled service members? I have a personal friend who is a transgender military veteran, and he's had a very difficult time over the last 8 years or so. Would you say that the culture and the environment towards LGBTQ service members within the VA system is improving, or where would you say that is?
It very much depends on location and who's in charge of the services. There are several locations throughout the country that are doing great things for our LGBT veterans. Colorado is one, Washington is one, actually Tennessee is one, and a few other places where the VA system is working very well within the LGBT community and making those services available. But again, it's very location dependent. And definitely, some VA system hospitals are definitely still struggling to get the right doctors that are compassionate enough to learn and understand rather than, do something that's a blanket type policy. So it's definitely location dependent, and we're moving in the right direction. The National VA is very much trying to push LGBT health right now. We have a very big advocate in Dr. Jesse Ehrenfeld out of, I think he's the secretary of the AMA board right now. He's a commander as a reservist in the Navy as an anesthesiologist, and he's doing great things as far as LGBT health, which is probably why the Tennessee VA health system is improving when it comes to LGBT issues. He does a lot of teaching and things like that. So it's definitely improving, and he's definitely using his position to help push out the right information. So it's moving in the right direction, but it's still very location dependent. Similar to active duty service members, what the kind of treatment that they get is still very location dependent. So.
Okay, I know we've talked about the health care with the transgendered population. And I know that you started your conversation talking a little bit about the right to stand for something. Those athletes who took a knee wanted justice in the United States. Mm-hmm. When we look at the transgender community, are you familiar with the case of the young 17-year-old that was mutually murdered in Missouri?
Yes.
And the fact that that's not even considered a hate crime.
Correct.
Would you comment on why that isn't?
One, it's Missouri. Missouri is still a very scary place for the LGBT community, especially outside of downtown areas of St. Louis and Kansas City, and some in Columbia because of the big university there. And I don't see it getting any better until people start advocating in that regards, and until advocates are able to be heard from the rafters, because right now they're very much pushed to the back. We have a lot of things to be done. There's still a lot of work to be done. As I said, open transgender service is really only a stepping stone. So let's take, for instance, the repeal of Don't Ask, Don't Tell. Once the repeal of Don't Ask, Don't Tell happened late 2010 and was fully implemented in the middle of 2011. As we saw that repeal happen, and things, if you noticed, marriage equality laws around the same time started to fall across the country, because more and more people started to come out because because of the repeal of Don't Ask, Don't Tell, and because the military is seen as that honorable position. And so as we continue in our fight for equality within the military, people who serve go back to their communities, right? Not everybody's a lifer. They serve with people who are gay or lesbian or things like that. That's kind of how we saw the integration of African Americans in 1948 kind of spearheaded the start of some of that civil rights movement, because people who served with Black and African Americans came back to their communities and had different feelings and experiences, right, where they were able to change that thought. So as we continue to fight for the permanency of open transgender service, I think that those types of ideas and ideologies will start to change as pieces of the larger population get more experience and personal interaction with transgender people. I mean, it's a very small population as it is, so it's a very limited exposure, but it's still an exposure that has the chance to change hearts and minds because they still have that experience with them. So until we get to that point, which we're still at least, probably 5 to 7 years, we will continue to see the violence that happens, and taking a knee or taking a stand, it really comes down to, the action that you've chosen to do, right? Whether I take a knee or take a stand, it's still the message that's attached to that, right? So until we get to that point, the message just needs to keep going and going and going. And as we gain allies, we will gain momentum. But until then, we will still see the violence.
Can you give us a sense of the particular challenges of trans service members of color?
I'm not necessarily qualified to speak on that. I would say that they definitely have a different experience. We have several service members who are trans people of color with a variety of experiences throughout the military. I wouldn't say they're not all great, and they're not all bad. A lot depends on being female to male, male to female, where they're stationed. The more remote location they are, the more likely they are to experience some kind of similar discrimination, not just for being trans, but for being a person of color as well. So it just depends on, a lot of it depends on location, service, and religious ideologies.
Just a quick follow-up since
Yeah.
I've got the mic. Do you think then, and what I'm hearing is that it might actually be easier, the gender is easier than
Their transition is easier than being a person of color?
Female to male, for example.
Oh,
transition is better than or wipes out a lot of the race.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Being female to male automatically gives me a level of privilege that our male to female service members don't have. And if you look at most trans narratives, female to males are typically excluded because we don't exist, because we're not scary. I mean, that's really what it comes down to. People are not intimidated by someone like me walking into a room versus a trans woman walking into a room, and their immediate reaction is not one of disgust, to need to understand, right? Because we value masculinity in our culture over femininity. So that's a big portion of it. So does the experience of female to males easier? Yes. Is that the case everywhere? No. Definitely depends on, because we still deal with service members who have their idea of what females are supposed to look like, and so those transitioning to male can get some discrimination regarding what is supposed to be the prim and proper female service member. I'm glad I never served with any of them, or I would have been kicked out a long time ago. Any other questions?
I have a question. I have always been, excuse me, thank you very much for being here.
Absolutely.
I'm from a very small town, and what I noticed growing up is that there wasn't always leadership within the minority community. So over the course of 40 plus years, what has happened is I've become an advocate for people who are Hispanic and then just women in general. Perhaps you've already kind of answered this with the last gentleman, but not to say that being masculine or macho is something that's just within the Latin community as far as, machismo. But whenever I continue to encounter people within my own culture who have such a disdain for anything that's different from them, I struggle so much as as far as wanting to be a leader within my community, because I don't know, I think I learned in my mid to late 20s, love really does take care of a lot of things. So I don't know if either from your education or your personal or your professional experience, can you tell me what more we might be able to do for minorities, not just Hispanics, but minorities who are experiencing such an incredible backlash from their own people to get to be who they feel they should be, to be happy?
So again, it's one of those things where I'm definitely very white, and I have not had many of those experiences, and I try very hard not to speak for the minority population, because that's definitely not my place to do so. I understand that as far as leadership is concerned, a lot of times the best way to change something is for us to get up and change it ourselves. So finding that intestinal fortitude to step forward and know that something needs to be changed and not expect someone else to do it for you is a big aspect of what we do, right? Again, it's kind of that homogeneous unit principle. I'm not going to be able to walk into a Hispanic or an African American community and change their mind about anything. It's got to be within the minority community. They have to. We have to have those leaders. Now, can I do that? Absolutely. Are they going to listen to me? Probably not. So they may listen to me long enough to start to listen to you, and that's part of what I do, right? But really, the big thing is if we see something that needs to be changed, is that we need to take the time to step in and change it ourselves, as you've done, obviously, with advocating within the Hispanic community or advocating within the female community and things like that. So do I need males that are feminists? Yes, absolutely. But again, the ones who need that feminist education aren't always going to listen to the ones that don't fit the narrative, right? So it's knowing who your audience is and knowing who you need to talk to. So as you said, love changes everything. So patience and persistence are amazing qualities that people need to have in order to be good advocates, because if we get offended that every time somebody uses the wrong pronoun, then we're going to be going back and forth for a long time without actually changing anybody's mind. So it's all about doing that education piece along with the rest of the stuff. So I think that's as best as I can answer.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
First of all, thank you for your service. I'm actually the spouse of a transitioning male to female. What I'm curious about is, for your service members who are transitioning or have completed their transition, does SPARTA reach out to organizations in the civilian sector? For example, obviously VA, because VA is the most logical connection. But does it also reach out to organizations for example, National Gay Pilots Association or other organizations in the workforce to assist with people who are transgendered in trying to fight the battle that they're obviously going to fight when they enter a civilian sector?
So we have a specific organization that we partner with that helps with that for veterans specifically. It's called Transgender American Veterans Association. They're growing and done some reorganization, and they're doing great things within the veteran community. They're one of the leading organizations that helped change the DD-214 issue, where we couldn't change your name on the DD-214 because it was a historical document. Their advocacy and leadership, along with some other organizations such as ACLU and HRC, got the military to change that policy to where people can actually change their name on their DD-214 and therefore not out themselves every time they apply for a federal job, right? So we partner with Transgender American Veterans Association. I partner with Human Rights Campaign on many with a lot of things. National Center for Transgender Equality. But as far as the employment organizations and things like that, we've typically let TAVA handle a lot of that because they have we're kind of occupied with the active duty situation at the moment. But TAVA and us work very hand in hand with making sure that we try to do what we can for veterans. Obviously, I'm not doing enough at the moment. I'm preoccupied, and I'll let if they're watching. Yes, I understand that we're not concentrating on veterans as much as we should, and we're gonna work on possibly fixing that over the next few months. But right now, we're a little occupied. So I encourage service members to reach out to organizations that concentrate on veterans to make sure that they have the support that they need, because they do need that support. So we also help with a lot of families, right? So families of transitioning service members. We have spouses groups and things like that that kind of help spouses come to terms with their transitioning service members. So.
All right, I know y'all might have other questions that maybe you want to catch him afterward, but I do want to take this time to thank him for being here again. If we could. And we do have a gift from Buff Allies, including a rainbow stole, because one of these days he will have to graduate again from another program. So hopefully you'll have that opportunity to wear
yes,
that.
Absolutely.
Thank you again for your service and for being here tonight.
Thank you. Thank you.
And thank you all.